Okay, we're recording now. Good evening, everyone. How's everyone tonight?
Great.
Excellent. Feeling fresh? Good. Me too. Um, all right, so you saw that I finally made your midterm available online. It will be open through midnight next Wednesday, October 20th. If there are some circumstances that cause you to be delayed, let me know. I want you all to take it. Um, so, but hopefully you can get it done by the end of the day next Wednesday, so that we can all find out what you got. And the quiz 2, I posted some answers and explanations for answers in Blackboard. So that's with the in the tests and quizzes section. So check that out if that is if you're interested in knowing. It's still, there seem to be some limitations in terms of Blackboard when you get an assessment, like just how much can you see. It would be nice if you could just go back and look at it. So I'll keep working on trying to make that as useful as possible. Okay, so last time we talked about the French late Baroque, also known as Rococo. So the midterm goes up through that period. So it will include some things on the Rococo style. I took some questions directly out of the text of the Abrams Guide. So some of the questions you will need to refer to the text and look for answers. Also, same with the Smith book. There's some questions that ask you for information that is found in the Smith book. Okay, so we start now to get into a period of well, where a lot of things start happening. 1700s or 18th century, the the style of the Rococo in France, it coincides approximately with Queen Anne style in England. And a lot of the English forms of design either remain very much medieval, past the Middle Ages, or they take a lot from French design. And so like the William and Mary style from England corresponds approximately with the French Baroque. And we're going to look at a little bit of Queen Anne and a little bit of some of the colonial furniture, the English furniture that was made in the English colonies that became the United States. There are two styles that are, I guess they were very popular and pretty common in terms of styles. William and Mary was found in the colonial period, but Queen Anne and Chippendale. We'll see some, you'll see some of that. You can still find, if you look up like now, just like web search Queen Anne furniture, you'll find a lot of retailers that sell furniture right now have Queen Anne furniture. You can find it very easily. It's a style that has persisted and is still a desirable style. And it started back in the 18th century in England. All right, so I have some links here. Let me share my screen. Get this. Share screen. Okay, so this is from the website of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. There is this. It's part of an essay, American Furniture 1620-1730. So this is roughly corresponds with the Baroque French, like the sort of like the Baroque era. Really, like it even starts a little bit before the Baroque era. But if you look at what was being made, like for example, this joined armchair, relatively simple, so based on English Renaissance design, made in New England, joined oak, panel and frame. So let's see, let's make that picture bigger. And you get some idea of the simplicity. Well, you over. You can see some of this relatively simple cut shapes of wood, and the ornament is interesting, not incredibly elaborate. And this piece here, I'm going to have to go back to this here. Also, I like this this spindle back. So this is what when you think about so 1640, 1680. So like this is when like the Baroque stuff is really starting to get going in France. There you go. There. So you can see all these turned spindles and the frame, all of the frame, the stretchers, which is the horizontal piece between the legs. All of those are turned on a lathe, which at this time there are no machines, so it would have been some kind of like pedal driven or crank, something with gears to, something to like help the lathe to turn. So you get some idea of the detail. And the material furniture that was built in the Americas was built a lot of it with oak because oak was plentiful and it's also a very hard and durable wood. Walnut, sometimes. So they couldn't make, they didn't make the furniture with English woods. That really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So here, and here you start to get like here. This is this chest, possibly by William Searle. So they have some names of furniture makers, which this is like in the English colonies, you would start to get furniture made, like furniture is attributed to the individual furniture maker, whereas mostly what we've seen so far, furniture is attributed to like it's given the name of the king or queen that commissioned it, or the reign in like like the period of time that's associated that is like associated with a certain um, monarch. So this Thomas Chippendale, who is in England, and we'll look at his furniture. He's a little bit later than this. Um, he's credited with being the first real commercial furniture maker whose name is attached to a style of furniture, as opposed to it being like Louis XIV, Queen Anne. Um, so here you get some idea. The designs in the colonial, like in the English colonies, are simpler. They're less elaborate, less ornate. There definitely is ornament, but they're working with certain limitations. For one, um, they don't have the resources that they might have had in England. They are more concerned with survival than luxury, because it was a pretty challenging proposition for them to come to the Americas and try to begin a colony. A lot of them didn't survive. There's some that just vanished, and no one knows where they assume they either starved to death or they were killed by native nations that did not particularly care to have these invaders plop down and start taking territory. So, but you also there is a religious component to the lesser degree of ornament, and that is that a lot of the like we have the story of Thanksgiving and the Puritans or the Pilgrims that left England because they were persecuted for their version of Christianity that they preferred to follow. Um, Extravagance was really considered to be sinful by a lot of the people that came from England to the Americas, and so they weren't even if they had it. I mean, this is a little showy. I mean, this is like you're tempting the hand of God by dressing this piece of furniture up so much, and it was very serious. They were they took that kind of thing serious. You see that in shaker furniture, where there's really no ornament because they considered ornament to be unnecessary. It was a distraction. It was extravagance that takes your mind away from God. That's my summary of it. If there were any shakers left, they could fill in more information. Okay, so yeah, so you can see it's kind of I think in a way there's a certain unique quality to this colonial furniture because the people the people that made it had to work with either new materials, more difficult conditions, and they were so they really did not have they didn't have the resources, or in some cases really even like it wasn't a priority to make it look the way it looked in England. Okay. So there are a few examples of domestic architecture still in existence on the East Coast from the colonial period, and I think these can be quite interesting to see. Have any of you been to the Art Institute of Chicago and seen the Thorn Rooms? Little tiny, they're little tiny facsimiles of interiors from, they're like historical interiors, and they're not always completely faithful or, you know, 100% accurate. You know, the woman who was responsible for putting them together. There are historians that have looked at it and said, like, yeah, well, she's kind of making it look the way she wanted it to look, but it's pretty close. It's very interesting because there are some, like, interiors from the colonial Americas that show, like, they're little tiny, very beautiful recreations of interiors, like architectural interiors. And so I suggest if you are ever at the Art Institute, go down to the basement level and check out the Thorn Rooms. Okay. So here you see this wingback easy chair that was a type of really like a type of chair that appeared in the colonies, the English colonies. So we're talking about English colonies that eventually became the United States here. So, and one thing I also want to mention, I put a link to it in the read it as like the I guess the course materials, like reading like web resources. I found this it was a PhD dissertation by someone at Virginia Commonwealth University from a few years ago, and it's about African slaves that were furniture makers, that were every bit as skilled as the European Caucasian furniture makers, and so when we talk about who made them, sometimes they were made by we don't always know who made these things, but we shouldn't assume that it was always the Europeans that made this stuff. So here, this easy chair, let's go back to, darn, sorry about that. I want to advance to this. There we go. So here, so this easy chair, 1715 to 1730. So this is like, Baroque, Rococo period in France. This is an example of the earliest known type of American easy chair, a new form to emerge in Boston during the William and Mary period. Tall back, double scroll arms with a turned base. Turned means made on a lathe. That's the structure of this. Easy chairs were expensive because of the costly textiles required for their upholstery and were therefore prestigious to own. With its padded back, wings, and arms, and feather-filled seat cushion, the easy chair introduced a new level of seating comfort. And here, so this is clearly the upholstery is new because they have pictures of the structure underneath. So if you have some of these, these furniture pieces that were found, like the wood's in good shape, the upholstery's in tatters, which is likely, which is what happens because you use it for decades or centuries and it gets worn out. At a museum, they will carefully have furniture conservators strip that old material away, probably save it so they have it save at least some example of it so that they know what the original material actually was. I have a friend who is a chemist, and he works at the Art Institute in the conservation department, and he does a lot of chemistry work in finding out like dye composition the material, so that when they try to renovate, restore these, they can come as close as possible to the original material, the original color, the original colorant when they're doing this. Pretty interesting. It's fun talking to him about this stuff. So, but he does, like, they look at stuff at a microscopic level. So here's the frame. There's the chair. Nice. I love the this pinky orange fabric. There.
So were you saying that this chair is also kind of characteristic of the Baroque period?
Um, no,
Or
but
did I hear you wrong?
it's happening at the same time as Baroque in France.
Okay, so the colonial period was happening here at
Yes.
the same time as the Baroque period. Okay.
So the stuff we're
That's
looking at,
quite a contrast in kind of the styles of furniture that they were doing, just
very
given,
much.
yeah.
Um, I think there's a big difference in who the furniture was made for. Even this, like this is an expensive luxury item right here, and the French furniture makers probably would have laughed at it as you know like something a child would make. It's not covered in gold. It's not. I mean, like the materials are simple, even crude. But now I mean we look at this. I mean, I personally don't come from I don't come from wealth. So to me, I don't have that expectation that things be um, all the materials be of the finest sort. And I think that the furniture makers in this is from Boston, and Boston was one of the first cities to be established and to grow into a population center. Um, there was a certain there was a there was sort of like, and there kind of still is this what's sort of like a pseudo aristocratic class in Boston. This sort of like upper class, the wealthy, and it didn't really ever like take hold in this country the way it had already established itself in England, where you have nobility, you have descendants of monarchs, um, and people with the title people from nobility. We don't we didn't have that. That was part of the point of these the colonists that were the English colonists here were being taxed out of their minds, and that was like one of the reasons that they rebelled against English rule. They wanted self-rule, and so this the idea of I mean, there's definitely wealth and inequality, but we didn't have the same like so like what is like exclusive luxury item is in the American colonies would look a lot simpler than it would in France or even England. So there, frame there. Let's go to some more of this. Yeah, there are a bunch of those. I'm just going to back out of that. Okay, so these are some examples of the early colonial, um, and you can see it's almost like this even like looks a little bit medieval to me, like English medieval with some simple, um, like chip carving on the surface. But when we get into later, let's go back to this. This is another. It's from an essay from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is 1730-1790, Queen Anne and Chippendale styles. We'll talk more about Chippendale. Um, so here, like this, it's taking its time. All right, so here, this dressing table, back to this, get some of this information down here. So 1740, 1750. As we know, 1776 is the American Revolution. So this is a little before that. Classic example of Queen Anne style. This dressing table has cabriole legs terminated in a delicate slipper foot, part with a shell that is fully integrated into the scrolls of the skirt. Okay, so cabriole leg, that leg right there curves out, back in. Looks a little bit like maybe it's an animal leg. That the term like cabriole refers to what I have read refers to like a leaping goat, but it is meant to like cabriole leg refers to that sort of like curve out and then back. And the slipper foot, so like the feet, they had different feet. Pad foot, slipper foot, ball and claw are three different types of feet that the leg would terminate at. The shell, so this is where the Queen Anne has a relationship with Rococo. The shell, you see this shell motif carved into Queen Anne furniture. And the shell is also a feature of the French Rococo. All right? And like these, you see some of these like brass poles. This starts to become like really like their ornament in some respects. Like sometimes the only like this like brass ornament that's relatively simple, but really is kind of nice with that wood.
So I have a question. So it was named after Queen Anne, then, right? So that has English origin. Was
Correct.
this in the Americas and in England at the same time?
Yes. Now,
Okay.
it was originated in England, but because it was popular in England and this was a colony of England, it was really it was transferred over to the Americas. It was popular. Okay. So there's that's not what I wanted to see. All right, and here a side chair. So this type of side chair, early to late 18th century. All right, let's see. We got. So this is an example. It has the cabriole leg, pad foot, and the very simple. So in the Queen Anne furniture, you'll see this vertical element in the middle of the back is called a splat, S-P-L-A-T, and it was cut in such a way that the negative shape would create this mirror image symmetry. And sometimes, like if it was often they were like curved down, it looked kind of like what's called a hawk's beak. But you can see the furniture, the wood is, I'm not sure what this wood is. It's have to get more information about that. But like just like a simple upholstery on the seat and wood, the turned stretchers. So these stretchers are is this horizontal element that goes between the legs that gives it support. Sometimes you don't see stretchers on the base of furniture. Now here we have this chest of drawers. All right, 1730s, Boston cabinet makers transformed the traditional flat-top turned leg William and Mary style high chest into the scroll top cabriole leg Queen Anne version. So the scroll top, which is a broken pediment, okay, so you can see here you have these. So it has this same leg, the cabriole leg with the pad foot. Right there. Shell motif. It's got a little bit like this kind of like mini architecture, little miniature architecture to it, with what look kind of like fluted pilasters on the sides. And there are these finials, which are, this like, like here there's like this little urn with a like twisted finial on it. And this, in Renaissance architecture, Michelangelo was one of the architects that did this, where instead of like the traditional triangular pediment on a over an entrance or over a doorway, he experimented with different ideas like curving it, like making a semicircular pediment, sometimes breaking the pediment. You can see it in the Italian Baroque architecture as well, and then in the French Baroque, where you see the pediment is broken and there's something placed in it. Sculpture, or maybe like this, where it has this like urn finial in it. So but this is something that's a feature that's like it's a change from the earlier William and Mary style to Queen Anne. Okay, let's go back to that. There. So what they call the scroll top is, it's also really, it's effectively a broken pediment. So best examples of this uniquely American design, such as high chest and its related dressing table, having carved gilded shells, delicate inlaid compass stars on the pediment and case sides. So they're still calling this a pediment. Okay. Very good. Okay, another Queen Anne side. You can see here like this really like a little bit more elaborate shape of the backsplat. Get really close here. You can see some of this nice carving. So you have this like really like a spiral shell, and still pretty like simple. It's really there's no gilding on this anywhere. Yeah, but you can see that the backsplat has this like really like sharp kind of like bird beak, which is sometimes referred to as a hawk's beak. And here you can see the shell motif on the cabriole leg. And here is this like paw foot. So they experimented with different, like the way the leg would terminate at the base, and there were different types: slipper foot, pad foot, paw foot, and more with Chippendale. You see the ball and claw, which is kind of like a Chinese influence on it. All right, let's move on to. There's a nice ball and claw. So here, card table. Card tables were a thing in the colonies. This exquisite example. Not sure why they're using exemplar. This is an example of a Newport cabriole leg card table. Okay, various elements of the script board are perfect proportion of equilibrium, curves of legs. This is okay. This is someone who wanted to be a writer wrote this. Poetry in wood. Well, look at those. Look at the ball and claw foot. Isn't that beautiful?
Ugh.
And often like what was considered to be the back leg was less important. So this is kind of like a little kind of a pad foot. But that ball and claw, I think, is really quite beautiful. You see this more elaborate take on the shell with, in a way, a little bit like the Rococo alternating C-scroll curves. Rather nice table. But you see, all this furniture is pretty simple in just being made with, like you do get some furniture like this. Chest of drawers. So this is a little bit more, this would be a little bit more, I guess, this would be a much more expensive item with tortoiseshell. So it looks like an example of, yes, chinoiserie in America. So the chinoiserie is when the European designers would add Asian motifs that they were aware of, or techniques. But a lot of it was like they would use imagery from that they considered to be Chinese or something from Asia or just from the East, because sometimes you find elements of Turkish design or Indian design in what is called chinoiserie. You see here it's still using the shell. So this is really would have to be pretty like a more unusual piece. All right. I want to get to a little bit of. Oh, here's another a little bit more elaborate card table. There we go. Okay. So now here, they're calling this typical New York features. This is an American Chippendale. So Chippendale furniture had what is called ears, these like little flourishes where this curves out up at the upper corner of the back. And there's much more elaborate carving, and even just like the way this is like the splat is perforated in several places. So there's a lot more carving. So they do get more elaborate, and Chippendale really loved that ball and claw. Okay. So yeah, Queen Anne, Chippendale style. So one of the reasons I would want you to know about these is that you can still get what's called Queen Anne or what's called Chippendale, and no, it's not exactly the same thing, but it has these elements. So I want to have a look at this this one last here, this card table. So most sophisticated New York Chippendale style card tables have serpentine sides, shaped corners, gadrooned skirts, which is that little detail on the bottom, 5 cabrio legs, ending in a claw and ball foot.
They didn't practice after.
So check this out.
So they just quit because you guys were beating them?
No, they won. They won.
Okay. So a difference between Queen Anne and Chippendale in the American versions is that the Queen Anne is simpler. Chippendale will have more carving, more ornament.
I want to hear about it when I'm done with my class, okay?
All right. Very, very good. Okay. So here, there is a lot more. If you wish to read this information on this, you may. What's your impression of this furniture? Is it cool?
It reminds me a lot of what you see in New England.
Yes. Yes, you know, which is, of course, which makes sense because that's where it was made. This is all like, there was, there at this time there wasn't anything being made in the Midwest, what we call the Midwest. This was still woods. This was, there was just like not a lot of European settlement out here. So also, if you look at I've seen this, like you'll see this furniture watching films and television shows. For anything like any, I watched. Did any of you watch the series House of Cards?
Yes.
Which largely takes place it takes place in Washington D.C. And a lot of it takes place in in the White House. It's it's about the government and a president, and you'll see this furniture all over it, because what follows a type of furniture called federal style that has a lot of similarities to the Queen Anne, where like they add some elements like an eagle, or like they change like the brass poles that have these like simpler oval poles on the drawers. Um, there's a like federal style. So this sort of like a later version of something furniture that looks like this was developed. It's really kind of like adopted and patronized by the United States government. So you'll see a lot of this stuff, and like the U.S. Capitol and the White House have there's there's basically like a restoration workshop. I think it's in the basement of the U.S. Capitol that is constantly at work restoring old furniture from the 19th century, from the 20th century, 19th century, even back to the 18th century, because they still use this furniture in the U.S. Capitol, in government buildings, the White House, because it's part of the tradition.
I feel like it's a lot of wood.
It is a lot of wood. There used to be, I mean, this continent was covered by forests. And I read this when I was getting my bachelor's degree in history, reading about the history of one of the many history U.S. history classes that I took. In it's like the middle of the 19th century. So, when they were a lot of the like the middle and the western part of this country started to get developed. Someone made some comment that the forests of Michigan were expected to last 500 years and providing wood for furniture, for timber, for housing. And it was more like 50. Maybe 70, they like maybe 100 years, but they had to stop clearing trees because they were getting to where they're just like knocking down way too much of the forest. So so it's a lot of wood, and something that it's like similar with a lot of things like farming. The soil was not like it had not been used for farming the way the Europeans farmed, and so they couldn't believe.
Oh, I already fed Ollie.
They couldn't believe how much just like black soil there was, and so it's been the trees, there were just like unending trees. They just couldn't see the end of it, and so they just used it, and understandably so. But now you get to where like a lot of this this was their resource. So, but they also didn't have the same standard for luxury that existed in Europe. Even so, like this is, and like similar to like other like everyday furniture for people who were not wealthy or middle class, because you start to get the emergence of what you can call a middle class in this, right before the Industrial Revolution. Most people like they made like really simple like benches and chairs and tables that were functional, but you didn't need a furniture maker to make it. You just like people just knew how to make simple furniture.
Well, I think it's also interesting. I feel like some of this furniture reminds me of what like my parents have in their home. And like it's interesting to think about like what generations get like this furniture. Like I sometimes wish my parents had more modern furniture, but like although this was way before my parents' time, it feels like something they might have looked up to like a
Yes.
while ago. Like, and it's interesting to see when stuff starts to trickle into what homes and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So,
Definitely. I mean, it's a look, and
hmm
people like people of my parents' generation would have had ideas about what nice furniture is, and
hmm
parents have the same idea. Um, and this is considered. I mean, it's kind of like we're also going to talk in the second half. We're going to talk about neoclassicism in Europe because that's where Chippendale starts out. And after like the Baroque and the Rococo, and the Rococo gets really like as you saw last week, it gets out of hand with ornament. It's just like everything. They're just like just put more ornament on it. It'll look even better. Like the more ornament you put on it, it's just like 10 times as much ornament means it's 10 times better. Um, and they just didn't know how to. They didn't know when to quit. And so then there were other people involved in furniture and furniture design and architecture, just like they'd had enough. And what they returned to was neoclassicism, this sort of like this like a new version of Roman, Greek, and then also some Egyptian, because it was stable. It was considered like you knew that was good. You could look at some of the crazy ass Rococo stuff and be like, I don't know if that's good. Like it's elaborate, but I don't know if that's good. But when you see sort of like Greek revival or this sort of like neo-Greek or like new like updated Roman reappear, a lot of people could look at that and say, well, I know that's good. This is under control. This is getting back under control. And so there was a really like an appetite to do that in England and in France, especially in England. The English were really just like there's a way you do architecture, and it's this way, and they're kind of uptight, but got to keep things under control. And that idea keeps coming back, where like if you're not sure what's good, there are certain things you can go back to because they've been established as good way before you were even born. And whether that may not be true, but it's in the mind of a lot of people that something that was known in a previous time period, that must be good. Otherwise, why would anybody remember? And so that's sort of like the basis of what makes something classic. Like why we call something classic. It's like something that it's familiar. We know it's good. It might not be innovative. It might not even be great, but there's a sort of a certain comfort in the stability of it. Even if that's not, even if that stability is more of a facade. But like the modern furniture, like 20th century furniture, mid-century modern, that is now like a more like an older, like that's a style where it still looks very modern. You still see people use like modernist furniture from the 50s and 60s in like futuristic sci-fi stuff, or like it's pretty interesting how that in some respect it still looks modern, it's still considered modern. And but yeah, there is this like my grandmother's house in Detroit had just like it was like heavy, dark, wooden furniture, and the upholstery was like a lot of this stuff with like a pattern. Like it had the um, the hmm, it was like it just had this sort of like feel to it. I can still remember like the sofa in my grandma's house, the texture of the upholstery, and you know, it was a small house. They weren't rich, but they had their furniture pieces, and they were solid. So, and that's it's sort of like, so yeah, like it's a traditionalist kind of thing. But you know, at the time, this was like a really like this for someone to make furniture, you know, this like it was really like this is like for the 18th century, this would have looked very modern because it's like, you know, like some of these things, you know, this dressing table right here, or like the side chair. Whoopsie, sorry. So these are really simple compared to what was being made in Europe. So, okay, so I wanted you to see that, you know, because there's stuff going on in, you know, at the same time. These are the colonies of the French and the English that we're mostly that we're concentrating on, and you know, you also see like Spanish Baroque in Mexico, in Argentina. Like a lot of like churches have this like you know, it's like a colonial Baroque design to it. And so the Spanish did the same thing. They're bringing the same stuff over to their colonies. Okay, we are going to take a break right now. Let's see, stay signed in. We'll take about, let's see, 7:03. Come back at 7:15. And we're going to talk about the some neoclassical and look at a little bit more of the European Chippendale, the man himself. Okay.
I